Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella recently said that Microsoft is now prioritizing security, not AI, surprisingly, above all else. This was not a directive that came out of nowhere. Microsoft recently was dinged publicly by the Department of Homeland Security's Cyber Safety Review Board for its actions and lack of actions around the Storm 0558 cyber attack. So, what's a Microsoft customer to make of all this situation? Are there lessons to be learned and actions they should be taking based on Microsoft's shortcomings in this space? We're going to talk about that on today's episode. Welcome to the Directions on Microsoft Briefing podcast. I'm Mary Jo Foley, the editor-in-chief here at Directions. I'm your host for the series of podcasts for those interested in the Microsoft Enterprise IT ecosystem. My guest for today's episode is Directions analyst Michael Cherry, who analyzes and writes about the Windows Client OS, Office Communication Services, and corporate governance. Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for joining me on today's podcast.
It's a pleasure to be speaking with you, Mary Jo, on this topic. Because it's
a
topic.
You're excited about this one.
No, I am, because this is a topic I've been following and I've been advising Directions subscribers on since Craig Mundy and Scott Carney's Trustworthy Computing Initiative. And Mary Jo, that was more than 20 years ago that Microsoft first told us that security was important.
Yep. I remember it all too well. You and I are true veterans here. We remember those old days and old problems and the old guard.
Yeah, but it's important because Microsoft's trying to promote that, well, security's always been important to us.
Right.
And, it is from time to time when they get caught in these incidents like this that are embarrassing to them. And so then security becomes important for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, let's jump right in, though, to the most recent of these incidents. I want to hear your takeaways from the Cyber Safety Review Board report. To start, I'm interested what you think the findings mean regarding Microsoft's ability to run large-scale cloud services securely, and what, if anything, can customers do about this?
I've come to the conclusion based on the report that Microsoft is overselling its competency to run large-scale cloud services. They may have many of the functions under control, and they may be managing their costs and power consumption and all these other problems that come from running large data centers. But the configuration of the services and the management of security is ripe for examination based on what we're seeing. And so, to put the lesson learned into action, it's obvious that organizations need to keep people on hand with the expertise to constantly assess Microsoft security services and look at what's happening with the services they're running, look at the logs from those services, examine the security settings, and basically keep an eye on how Microsoft is running the data centers.
Mm-hmm. Right. Don't just put all your eggs in the Microsoft basket and trust them, in other words.
And this was oversold to a certain extent. It was cloud was sort of sold that, you'll be able to cut your costs because we're going to be doing all of these things. And the problem is that you cut some costs in some places, like you don't have hardware anymore. You don't have to have people who are maintaining the hardware. You don't have to do that. Yes, you saved some money there. But now you've got to spend more money on people who really have the expertise to manage security and to monitor security on a day-to-day ongoing basis.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Okay, I want to talk about transparency because that was another issue that figured very prominently in the Cyber Safety Review Board's findings. Basically, they said Microsoft was not transparent until its hand was forced about what happened with the Storm 0558 attack and when it happened and to whom it happened. So I'm curious what you think this means in terms of how and where customers should be looking for security information on Microsoft services.
Well, it is from the report obvious that you cannot rely on Microsoft's information that it publishes about these incidents. So to put the lessons learned into action, organizations need to find other sources of information, including the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, that's CISA, CISA, the FBI, reports from third parties such as security vendors. So, for example, Mary Jo, I use some hardware firewalls, and I use some security services in my little data center here in my office.
Mm-hmm.
I work remotely, but I still am concerned about security. So I monitor every week the reports that my firewall vendor sends me about the incidents that they're seeing in the wild. I
Mm-hmm.
monitor the reports from one of my security software services that I use. And I use those to look into reports rather than Microsoft's.
Okay.
But I want to give you one last one that's really interesting. Um, a lot of companies these days are reluctant to report these incidents, and what they're doing is they're getting lawyers involved in the incidents early on. And what happens when the lawyers walk into the room is that they start protecting things, information with attorney-client privilege, or they call it work product.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't really matter. That's part of what's happening. We can't really do a lot about that. But there's one agency that they're going to be very reluctant to not fully disclose to, and that's the Security and Exchange Commission. And because
Right.
Microsoft is a public company, and because these are now considered by the Securities and Exchange Commission to be material factors affecting their financial reporting, you get actually very good detailed information if you look up the Security Exchange 10K reports for Microsoft, and you compare that to what they're saying publicly, and you'll garner some additional information.
That's a good tip for reporters too. I like it. Okay, let's talk about logs because the whole issue of who has access to them specifically was at the center of the Cyber Safety Review Board. Um, I'm curious what could have been done differently in the Storm 0558 attack. How should customers make sure they get the log protection they need in these kind of matters without paying even more than they're already paying for some of these E5 services that they have?
You know, this is a real lesson to me, and I've gotten kind of negligent on this myself. And the third lesson is that logs matter.
Mm-hmm.
And this whole thing was found not by Microsoft. This incident that the Cyber Safety Board is reviewing was found by a Microsoft customer who had had problems before, and therefore they paid for the highest level, a G5 level of services. But they were not just paying for that, they were actually using it. And they had created some reports to analyze, how mail was being read, how things were being done. And they spotted the anomaly and reported it to Microsoft. And so this was a big wake up call, even for me, that yes, there are logs that you have to pay for, but there's also logs you get for free.
Mm-hmm.
And there's just so much data there that you just get lost in it. But the key lesson is that we have to start analyzing logs, and somebody has to be responsible for looking at logs. And this kind of ties into the first point about you have to hire people to do some of this work. So, our recommendation from Directions is that customers push for access to all of the logs for all of the services they are paying for, so that they can examine them with either Microsoft services or third-party tools, and for access to the top-level security and compliance features that'll let them analyze these logs in a timely manner. And I'm saying that until Microsoft demonstrates its ongoing security competency, they really should be making these logs available to all customers and working with them. But there's one more thing on this logs, and I'm going to bring it back when we talk about some other things in a few minutes, probably. But one of the key things that Microsoft's not doing is they're not providing us with documentation and training on how we should be looking at logs, what we should be filtering for. I've found almost nothing that would help you build the kind of reports that one customer had built. And that's the missing piece of the information. It's not just the logs. You have to have the knowledge of how to use the logs.
Right. That's a good point. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break here so that I can talk about enterprise agreements, or EAs as we know them affectionately or not so affectionately. So we do a lot of different kinds of podcasts here. We're doing one right now with Michael Cherry all about security. But I also last year had a chance to record a 6-part series with various members of our advisory services team here that's led by Dean Bedwell. And we talked exclusively about the Microsoft EA negotiation process in this series. So if you don't know Dean, before he joined Directions, spent 11 years at Microsoft managing the Canadian business desk, where he was responsible for negotiating agreements with Microsoft's largest enterprise and public sector customers. So he obviously knows what he's talking about. In this series that I did with him and his colleagues, we talked about everything from project management to discovery, analysis, strategies to get discounts and concessions. We talked about the whole procedure and process of EA. So whether you are new to the EA negotiation process or you're a veteran who wants to hear more, like tips and tricks from Dean, you should check out our Microsoft EA negotiation podcasts. And the way you can find these is go to directionsonmicrosoft.com/podcast, or if you prefer in video form, directionsonmicrosoft.com/videos. And you can listen to the entire series we did for free. Also, if you prefer to look at something in print, we have got a really good deep dive explainer on the Microsoft EA negotiation process, also available for free. You can check it out at directionsonmicrosoft.com/deep-dive/Microsoft-EA-negotiation. Or you can just go to the directionsonmicrosoft.com homepage and you'll see it as you scroll down the page. Okay, back to Michael and customer learnings from Microsoft's latest security foibles. So now we've been talking about all the things that happened and what Microsoft could have, should have done, and what customers should do. But what about this thing called Microsoft Secure Future Initiative? This is a new security initiative, kind of similar in some ways to trustworthy computing that you mentioned before. I'm curious if you think Secure Future Initiative will change any of the conditions and causes that led to the company getting such a bad report card from Homeland Security.
Mary Jo, I'm not really excited is not the right word. And I have no confidence. I have no confidence in this initiative. I guess that's the best way to say it. It was announced by Brad Smith and Charlie Bell in November 2023. After this report came out, Charlie Bell updated it in May with some additional information. Mm-hmm. But every time I look at it, and maybe I'm jaded, again, I mentioned our history on this. This is just a rehash of trustworthy computing. Mm-hmm. It's secure by design, secure by deployment, secure operations. And there was a fourth thing that didn't have security in it, was communications, which spoke to the transparency. Mm-hmm. But if Microsoft was doing this, and if this was supposedly built into their systems, why is it necessary to state it again? Why is it necessary to start up this initiative again? Why weren't they following through what they already knew to do? Mm-hmm. And now what really scares me about this is this initiative has a real apparent reliance on AI and machine learning at a variety of levels. Like AI is going to dig us out of this hole we're in. And I just don't see that that's the case. AI is just another tool. But if the disciplines aren't there, you're going to use the tool wrong.
Right. And then right before Build this year in May, Microsoft provided a few more details and promises about the Secure Future Initiative, what they were going to do internally to make sure they were more secure, and how that they felt would translate to what customers should be doing to become more secure. But I'm curious, was there any there at that point? Like originally we get the plan for Secure Future Initiative. Now we have these extra levels of detail. Do you feel like that now there's some meat to this thing?
No, because they keep making these claims that they're making security a top priority at Microsoft, above all else, over all the features. Right. They keep saying they're expanding the scope of this initiative, and they're going to integrate these recommendations from the Cyber Safety Board review into the initiative, and that they've based part of the compensation of the company's senior leadership team on their progress in this area. And yet all we hear day after day is this drumbeat of Copilot, 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 and get to Copilot. Yesterday we were discussing that there was a whole area of products that Microsoft has placed into preview around Azure Fabric.
Mm-hmm.
And they're in preview. Preview sort of implies that they're beta, they're being finalized, things are going to change in them before they reach production level support.
Mm-hmm.
And yet all of these features in preview are enabled by default.
Right.
So how is that secure by design and deployment?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Anything that's in preview by its very nature should never be turned on by default.
Right.
So I just don't think they get it. The features are turned on in preview so that people can get excited about it. That's marketing, marketing, marketing. And what we need is security, security, security.
Mm-hmm. So you're also talking, I'm guessing, about this app called Recall that they announced at Build that's supposed to help you find information wherever you interact with it on your PC by taking snapshots. It's already set off a lot of bells and whistles with security professionals, but also this app will be in preview when it comes out on these new Copilot Plus PCs. It starts shipping this month, so it's going to be on.
Look, the company needs to keep innovating. There's no question to that. Recall might even have some useful value, but not the way it's being promoted and not the way it's being rushed into the marketplace. Microsoft's already had some of their technologies weaponized in some of these attacks. And an example of this is BitLocker is being used by some ransomware now as an encrypting agent. And that's a shame. And BitLocker is a good tool. It's an important tool. But Recall is equally likely to be misused by somebody who figures out how to break into it.
Mm-hmm.
And, rather than rushing it out there, which is what it appears that they're doing to, again, keep this AI momentum, Microsoft needs to prove it's a leader in AI. We're getting services that may not be secure yet, and they may have other implications. There's three things we have to talk about now. There's the overall security of the data. There's the overall privacy of the data. And this word safe is starting to be used as kind of a proxy for ethical use of the AI.
Mm-hmm.
And nothing I see shows me that anyone has thought about making Recall secure, private, and safe.
Mm-hmm. Fair. And then back to the topic of security logs. I know you've said Microsoft is now saying they're going to retain 100% of security logs for at least 2 years, right? But isn't that still something people are going to have to pay extra for? And that brings up the whole issue of, should security be a paid service? I mean, it should be to some extent, but the things that are basics, like things like, retaining logs, making logs available to customers, should those be extra add-on payments on top of your existing Microsoft Cloud subscriptions?
Well, my opinion is, again, that goes counter to the Secure Initiative framework.
Mm-hmm.
If your products are secure, if they're secure by design and secure by deployment, then you shouldn't be making money on extra security tools to make them more secure.
Right.
I tend to look at security as being binary. You're secure or you're not secure. And so to have to pay to fix the security weaknesses in the products, to have to pay extra to get a level of security just doesn't seem right. I think we should pay a price for a product, and that product should be secure. Now, if that means they have to raise the price of E3 a little bit, because there's costs, I get that. That's fine, but you shouldn't have to go to an E5 level to buy security.
Okay, I want to close by talking about Build, because I thought, given Microsoft touting earlier in the month of May that they were really all in on security was job number one, that we would hear about security at Build. And there was a little bit of security information and news, but I was surprised that there wasn't more. And I know Microsoft has to prepare materials in advance for these kind of big events, but still, it felt like kind of a missed opportunity to talk about some of the things they're doing now in various products that they're announcing to make them more secure. What do you think?
So, Mary Jo, I'm going to put on my if I ran the world hat.
Okay.
Okay. If I ran the world, or if I ran Build, let me just, I'll back off from the world.
Okay.
Let's say I was in charge of Build this year. The first person on stage would have been Charlie Bell, and he would have talked for 15 to 20 minutes about security. And he would have made sure that everybody that had a presentation had a security aspect to that presentation. But what we got was the usual, and he's a good speaker. He has important things to say, but we saw Satya first. Okay, he's the head of the company. That's great. He has important messages. But security in his keynote was reduced to less than one paragraph at the very end, where all he really said was security is important to us. But there was no demonstration in his keynote or most of the other keynotes that that's in fact really what's happening. I watched two demonstrations, and these were in keynotes, and I just went like right through the roof. And I guess it's like a lot of people reacted to Recall, but one of them was a demonstration where they were trying to show how fast AI could do something. And so the basic scenario was they had these two companies, both of them produce smartphones, and they were going to try to figure out if they could get a better deal if they changed from one smartphone supplier to another smartphone supplier. And so the basic demo was this. I'm going to upload my bill from my carrier, and they'll analyze it and see whether or not I can get a better rate. And I just went sort of like through the roof. You're going to upload your entire bill? That bill has your address. It probably has the last four digits of your credit card. It probably has other information about you, your location, other information. Do they need all of that data to answer the question about whether or not a better rate is available? And there was no discussion about how long that image of that bill, or that bill was probably scanned by OCR, the data sucked out of it and shoved into some sort of AI model. How long is that data going to live there? Was it removed at the end of the demonstration after the analysis was done? Couldn't they have done the analysis with just maybe the zip code and the amount that the person paid? But you see how there was absolutely no discussion of security in that. And then in another demonstration, they're demonstrating Visual Studio. And they're running through the code, and everybody's happy because this is for developers and code's spinning by. And I swear, anybody, you can't see what they're doing. It's all flashing by, brilliant colors. IntelliSense is filling in lines. And suddenly he goes along the lines of, oh, look, Visual Studio caught a security problem. I'll just press this key and fix it. And then the implication was, well, now all this code is secure. No, they found one of who knows how many problems are in that code, but absolutely no discussion of any further analysis or security thinking. So that's why Build further convinced me. Build did nothing to convince me they're serious about this stuff. Build did everything to convince me that products and product sales are still more important. And it doesn't matter about the executive's compensation, because if they sell enough product, they'll get a good review.
Well, that's a pessimistic but realistic note to end on. So I just want to say thanks, Michael, because I like that you're taking things that Microsoft's saying and bringing it back to, okay, what does this mean for the customer? That's the most valuable thing we can do here at Directions, is show the difference between the rhetoric and the reality. So thank you again for helping us analyze that. And we're going to keep tabs on what you write next on this topic.
Thank you, Mary Jo. I look forward to it.
To close, I want to remind our listeners they can find lots more coverage of all things Microsoft related on Directions on Microsoft.com. Thank you for listening. If you have questions, comments, or any topics that you would like to hear the Directions analysts cover in one of these podcasts, please don't hesitate to contact me via Twitter or X at Mary Jo Foley. And speaking of X, give us a follow at Directions MSFT on X for all the latest Microsoft Enterprise product and licensing information. Thank you again.